Hi there, I'm Rick Schultz from Virtual Dynamics, and I wanted to take some time today to talk with you about loudspeakers and something that you can do that will cost almost no investment of money, just a little bit of investment of your time, to be able to make a really big improvement on almost virtually any loudspeaker. Now, of course, what we're going to be using here is a conventional loudspeaker with a dynamic driver, and I'm going to be showing you how to be able to increase the quality of the sound of the driver from a very, very simple little tweak that's very commonly, or very seldomly, I should say, seen in high-end audio speakers. So it basically would apply to anything. I've done it on speakers starting at about $500 a pair, all the way up to $45,000 a pair. No problem at all. It always has a really tremendous impact. In fact, sometimes I just can't believe that something that's so simple can make such an incredible impact, give you nicer, cleaner, easier listening music, less fatigue on your ears, faster response, better timbers. What this little tweak does for you for basically just maybe a half an hour of your time is absolutely fantastic. So what we're going to do actually is, and what we're talking about is actually taking the original screws that hold the drivers in, and you can see right here that the screw is holding this driver in. I'm just going to zap that out of there. And these screws are almost always steel. It's very uncommon to see anything used besides steel in these screws, although they can come with different types of platings and that sort of stuff on them. In fact, this one's a plated steel screw. The problem with them is that they resonate, and the high frequency energy that builds up on drivers really doesn't get a chance to get away. And even on low frequency drivers, as you change out these screws on the drivers, you're going to find that they move much faster. And you can take something like a subwoofer, do this little trick with the screws, and I've heard improvements that I thought maybe doubled the sound quality of a loudspeaker. So everybody that's done this in the past that I've talked to has been just blown away by how good this works. Basically, when you put in the brass screw, you want to be looking for an exact replica, if you could, in a brass screw. That's sometimes very hard to find, but you'll notice on this one we have a wood screw type thread on it, and typically on a brass screw, you're going to find some sort of a different head. Often they're going to be a slotted head, which that's fine. You can put that in there. It's going to look real great too. By the way, it usually accents the drivers and looks really fancy. If you get an opportunity to look at the bottom of this, you can see that it's flush on the bottom. And what that flushness does is, because it's flush on the bottom, it's going to grab more of the driver area itself and pull that in. So when I look for a screw, I usually find something that you don't want it too big to fit in. Like this screw head won't actually fit in there, so it's not going to fit appropriately, but something a little bit smaller like that, so it fits in and grabs lots of the driver as it's doing it. So you want even a wider head here than the original one, if you can find that. And then you want to go with the original thread. Now, if you're like me, usually I just like to get straight to the chase. And if you go to the hardware store, pretty much any hardware store is going to carry a screw just like this. And it won't catch nearly as much of the driver itself because it's got a different slope on the head here. And this screw really wouldn't be perfectly ideal, but it will work, and it will work fantastically. So if you're like me and you just want to get going with it, you can go ahead and find something like that to put in there. Now again, you want to have approximately the same size screw as the one that came out of there. And so if you see here, these are approximately the same size. And you know, the brass screw is maybe just a little thicker looking, but it's also shorter. I know the MDF is going to break down a little bit as I start to put screws in and out of this, so I believe that's happened a little bit. I'm comfortable with going with just a slightly smaller or slightly bigger screw in here. And the other thing is that you want to make sure that they're brass, not just brass colored. A lot of the screws that you can buy at the hardware store, if it says brass on them, then it likely is. But sometimes they look brass, but they're actually not. Another tool that I think every audiophile has to have is this little guy here called the Wheeler Fat Wrench. And I use this actually for high-end gunsmithing. I'm also into target shooting, and we use this to be able to take our stocks and fasten them to our rifles, and same thing with scopes and that sort of stuff. So just helps to be able to get the right amount of pressure. And this thing, you can set it anywhere between about 5 inch-pounds and about 70 inch-pounds, which is way too much for an application like this. We're going to be talking under 10 inch-pounds for this. And so the fat wheeler wrench, or the fat wrench by Wheeler, is a perfect tool to be able to work with your loudspeakers on. Why? Because as you do this, one of the most important things that you can do as you're replacing your screws is get the amount of torque of each screw to be as identical as possible. So as I turn this screw in, you see that I only turn to a certain degree until my fat wrench stops for me. That's because I've been set right now at about 8 inch-pounds. I don't want to go too strong with this. I basically just want to get my screw set in. My screw's going to be set in tightly, and my driver's going to be tight. I know because I left my original screws all in there, and that's holding it tight. So I'm leaving that one in. I'm replacing it with the brass, and then I go and I'll take my second screw and I'll pop it out, go right across from the original one, and then you'll want to put another brass screw in there. Once that one's done, pull your next screw, put another brass screw in. So when you get to putting all of your screws in, take each one of them and make sure that the torque is set to the same, that one of them is not tighter than the other. If one of them is a little tighter than the other, you're going to find that it'll actually affect your sound. It can pull your soundstage off to the left or to the right. This is also really important when matching your left and right speaker. If you got it set at about 9 inch-pounds on one, you want it set for the other for 9 inch-pounds on the other. You really kind of have to feel the brass thread as you're screwing this in. You can increase the amount of torque. As you do, you're going to get a cleaner and clearer sound, and it's pretty dramatic. In fact, you can also use this to be able to match the tone or the sound of each one of these drivers to the next one. Pretty amazing little thing to do, and for speaker designers, if you've never done something like this before, you'll find that a tool like this to be able to help you in working with your speakers and being able to work with something like this, you can take something where you've got a tweeter that's just a little bit bright or a little bit prominent or a little bit forward and doesn't seem to be integrating perfectly with the mid-range. In 98% of the cases, all you have to do is tighten up the brass screws on that particular driver, just a tad. Add maybe 1 inch-pound at a time to each one of the brass screws. And of course, doing that on both speakers back and forth. So as I was to increase the total amount of torque on the screw that goes into the tweeter unit itself, that's going to calm the tweeter unit down, make it faster and a little bit less fatiguing. You don't want to over-tighten because eventually you'll break your brass screw. I'm not going to be responsible for that one. You're going to have fun getting it out. So this is a tweak you just simply have to try. Everybody that I know that's tried it so far would just simply never go back to the original way of listening to their loudspeaker with the steel screws. Really, you're just going to find that the only thing they're good for, put them in a plastic bag, because if somebody that doesn't know about this, they're probably going to want the original screws in there. You can throw them back in afterwards, but you will probably never use the original steel screws in a speaker again. So enjoy that. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us, www.virtualdynamics.ca, and I'm Rick Schultz. Thanks.